Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's conversation, Black and Queer Founders Navigating Identity and Innovation in the Creative Economy. My name is Daniel Anzueto, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's event. If this is your first time attending one of our workshops, welcome. I know that StartOut's mission is to increase opportunity and success for LGBTQ+ entrepreneurs just like you. I'm grateful to our host for today, who took me up on an idea to build a meaningful conversation around his experience in the creative economy and has led us to this wonderful panel. Phillip Collins is a Black and queer art collector, marketer, entrepreneur, and the founder of Good Black Art. I'm a big fan, but I'll leave it to Phillip to introduce himself in detail and share insights about our panelists. The floor is yours, Phillip.
Wonderful. Thank you, Danny and StartOut for having us today. If you don't know me, my name is Phillip Collins, and I'm the founder of Good Black Art. Good Black Art is a company that is paving the way for everyone to live with art. We are really interested in building a connection between individuals, art, and their environments. And we believe art is everything, whether it is a painting, a sculpture, wearable art, film, performing arts, and we're just excited to connect with as many people as possible. It is such a pleasure to be here today with my friends and mentors and colleagues and peers and brothers, Jonathan and Emil. I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves. They are extremely accomplished and cool and just like move with so much intention. So I think it's great for them to share who they are and their journey to entrepreneurship. But also, it would be great for you all to share how you all met, just to kind of break the ice. So I'll pass it to Emil to start, and then Jonathan will just go over to you, and we'll just keep this going.
Okay, well, hi, Philip, and I'm so happy, and obviously Jonathan. I'm happy to be in fellowship and conversation with you all. You know, it's not often that we get to be in spaces like this, kind of as founders, as business people, as activists, right, as artists. So I'm grateful to be in as Black queer men. So I'm just happy to be in conversation with you both. So I'm Emil Wilbekin. I am the founder of Native Son. My background is in journalism and media. I am most notably known as the former editor-in-chief of Vibe magazine, where I was the first openly gay Black editor-in-chief of a mainstream magazine. And while I was editor-in-chief, we won the National Magazine Award for general excellence, beating out the New Yorker. Everyone's always like, tell that part, the New Yorker. So I have also worked at Essence magazine. I was editor at large there, managing editor of Essence.com. I worked at Afropunk as chief content officer, and I'm currently an assistant professor at FIT teaching journalism, magazine, feature writing, and public relations workshop. And again, I'm the founder of Vibe. So Vibe was started 9 years ago as an intervention for myself, where I wanted to be in communities like this. I wanted to be in community with other Black queer men and talk about our existence and do some mirror work and how we connect with each other, the things that are similar, the things that are different, what we can learn from each other. Native Son started on Instagram and has over 80,000 followers now. And then we have tentpole events like the Black Gay Leadership Forum, which Philip has participated in. We also have the Native Son 101 list, which features like prominent Black men who've had impact this year. We also host the Native Son Awards, which are June 11th in New York, and we'll be streaming on YouTube and Facebook. And that's where we honor like the icons, the people who've had like major impact on their either in their careers in a moment in time, but this is kind of career legacy work. So that is coming up, and we have a rock star roster of honorees. So super excited about that. I met Jonathan actually, I met both of you through the Native Son Network, but I met Jonathan particularly because I'm tossing to him through a mutual friend, Yashua Simmons. Jonathan and Yashua knew each other from back in college days in Washington, D.C., and working together, right? And um, Jonathan found Native Son somehow and was like, I want in, I want to be a part of it. I am a Native Son. I'm the only Black queer gallery owner in California. I'm a Native Son. And so then we met, talked about what we could how we could collaborate. I happened to be doing a stint in San Francisco where he's based, and he opened his gallery and had an open house for Native Son and allies in the community. And it was just a really beautiful love letter, but I think a very clear perspective on how Native Son works as a community of Black queer men from all different professions and parts of the country, parts of the world. So that's me. I'm gonna not eat up all the time. So this is Jonathan Carver Moore.
Thank you, Emil, and what a warm welcome. And first of all, thank you, Start Out and Phillip, for even including me in this dialogue with the two of you. This is something quite special as we get ready to kick off Pride Month. As Emil said, I'm Jonathan Carver Moore. I own Jonathan Carver Moore Gallery, which is here in San Francisco, California. I am the only openly gay male-owned gallery in all of California. And it's been something that's been a really treat. It's been something that's been a treat and quite special. The gallery is actually located in downtown San Francisco in the transgender district. For those of you who may not know, the transgender district here in SF is actually the first legally recognized transgender district in the entire world. And it was the kickoff to the gay rights movement during the Compton's cafeteria riots in the 60s. I'm really excited about what's to come actually in June. I have an all Black queer pride show that opens up June 5th at the gallery, and it will be up through August 16th. So for those of you who find yourselves in San Francisco, please come by to 966 Market Street. The show will also be online, but I'm very excited about that. How I got into this space, I actually used to work for a museum here in the Bay Area. And I realized that while institutions are really great in leading the charge and promoting artists' artworks, sometimes seems to be a void. And there was a void to me specifically in the fact that queer art, artists of color, and women artists are often what people are so much after and want to buy their artworks, but yet there's not people that look like me on the back end side of the programming. So while we might be on the walls, we're not often the directors, we're not often the curators, we're not often even the assistant gallery associates or registrars. And I thought that this was the perfect time and opportunity, given the political landscape a couple of years ago and wanting to see a different vision in the art world and making it much more equitable. So I actually stepped out on faith, to be honest, and I said it's going to be something that I want to fulfill and a dream that I want to come true. I opened up March 23rd, 2023, and I have since had 15 different shows, worked with over 50 artists, and I participated in about 13 art fairs globally. And here I am today. So thank you again, Phillip and Emil. I'm so happy to be in conversation with the both of you as well.
I told y'all they're like really, really incredible, and so pleased to be chatting with both of you. I think when we initially started this conversation, Emil, Jonathan, and I had a whole list of things that we had coming up for just in like our individual businesses and programs, but as we move into Pride. And one thing that I love about Native Son, one thing I love about building communities like Start Out has, is just the collectivism and the support that we have for each other. And we got on that call and we all said, I'm doing all these things, you're doing all those things, and how can we support each other? And so happy that this was one of those things that we were able to collaborate on. So again, thank you for joining. But I want to kind of kick things off, and I always like to start at the nucleus of why we are here. And we are all entrepreneurs in very different ways. It is certainly not the easiest path, but one that is important. And I know each of us have a real, a personal calling to what we do. So I'm going to ask this question to both of you, and maybe Jonathan, you can start with us. You already talked a little bit about your journey, but I'd like to know what led you to become an entrepreneur and ultimately like start your organization. You've given us a little bit, but I'd like for you just to double tap on it and give us a little bit more.
Of course. Thank you for the question, Phillip. Actually, when I moved to California about 9 years ago, I was working for a criminal justice nonprofit. And it was really all about focusing on the shift in social justice and getting Black people not to be constantly imprisoned. And while I was at that nonprofit and foundation, I realized that there was such a huge office and a particular office space where there was not any art on the walls. And I thought that we were working on something that was so serious, but I also wanted to have something joyous when you came to the office. And I built this arts community around me when I first moved here. And I thought what better way to go back and support them by buying and collecting artworks that were based out of California and California artists here in the Bay Area in particular. So I started to curate art shows inside of my office space. That then led me to, fast forward a few years, we're in the pandemic, and I just really realized that as much as I loved my job, I feel like I was missing a creative muscle. And there was something that just wasn't quite sitting right with me anymore. And I started thinking about what I could do next. Um, and that had us sitting at home a lot, thinking and reading and wanting to see, envisioning a different life. Once we came out of the pandemic, I actually applied to be an assistant curator at a museum. And that then led me to the position that I had at the museum, which actually ended up being a director position. And while I loved it so much, it was great, to be in that space. But as I mentioned before, institutions can sometimes have red tape. And with that red tape was stunting my growth. And I just saw something bigger and better for me. I thought I could support institutions from a different perspective. And, with it being that the fact that, commercial spaces were quite empty and rents were a little bit lowered, I thought this was the time to step out and see what I could do in opening my own art gallery. So I went into contract July or August of 2022, and it took about 8 months to build out the space. I tapped into my 401k. I had a nice gift and some savings, and I took it from there. And the entrepreneurial journey has been a journey. It is truly a labor of love. I mean, you work very, very, very hard, and there's no time that you are ever not working. But the reward is that you get to see the cultural shift. And I've seen that in about, a little over 2 years very quickly. It feels like I've been in business for 10 years to me. But to know that I'm a part of a shift that will ultimately change the person behind me, right? Or the person who wants to come up and see someone like them growing up in the space. Because I didn't know this as a little boy, as a little queer kid, a little queer Black kid, that this was even an opportunity. I only thought that we could be the things you are doing on the wall, not the people that are actually a part of what you are doing on the wall. So that has been my journey and coming to see what happens. And the great thing is that it's also given so many opportunities to artists who are so talented and they've wanted to share their gift, but they haven't felt comfortable sharing it with maybe the right gallerists, right? Because the fact that I am queer, the fact that I am Black, sometimes it's, goes without saying, there's words that don't have to be spoken when artists come to me and they want to talk about subject matter that might be sensitive for them to discuss with other individuals. So now that I've done that, I've really seen the rewards of the artistry that exists now in the world, the collectors who never thought they could be collectors because they never had someone wanting to approach them and target them as being collectors. I think of one particular queer couple who bought something from my first show in March. It was a $4,000 piece of art. They never spent that much money in their life on something outside of a vacation or their home. And now they're like one of my top collectors and they buy things that are 20 and 30K. Right. And like, which we like that. We like that too. So we can all stay in business. But it's just been great to see their collecting journey and how it does have an impact on not just me as a gallerist, but how does it impact on supporting the nature of the artist and their career? And then also how does it impact on the cultural landscape shift in San Francisco? And also it's even bigger because as I mentioned before, and wanting to support museums and institutions, now I'm seeing collectors wanting to come back and help assist in purchasing those artworks for institutions. So I feel like I'm doing more on the outside than I was on the inside when I was working at a museum.
Oh, I love that. I remember seeing the announcement in press that Jonathan Carver Moore was coming with the focus on the artists that you represent, and I was like, finally, this is exactly what we need. So thank you for sharing that. And Emil, I'd like to ask you the same question about your journey and the cultural shift that Native Son has brought to our community.
So similar to Jonathan's story, I think I and when I'm old, I'm the elder on the call. So also being the elder on the call, I have a perspective now on my career that I don't think I would have had 10, 20 years ago. And so when I look back, like I'm a builder. right? I'm a creator. I was the founding editor of Vibe magazine, right? And I worked my way up to become editor in chief. And so much of Vibe has impacted the work that I do now because being the first openly gay editor in chief of a national magazine, but also being the fashion director, being the style editor, being the associate editor, writing cover stories on Mary J. Blige's My Life, styling the Biggie and Faith cover. Like these were cultural impact moments for the Black community and the LGBTQ plus community. And so I've been privileged to be able to work in spaces where I'm using my craft and also activism and love to be able to create this cutting edge work. The funny thing about connecting Vibe to Native Son is that what I didn't realize is that they would make me go do press all the time. And I was like, I hated that. I was like, it's taking me from the work. Like, I'd rather be editing or on photo shoots or doing layouts. And they're like, no, we have to go to VH1. We have to go to MTV. We have to do all these things. There were all these young Black queer boys at home watching MTV, VH1, E, all of that, and clocking that I was queer. And so that kind of built in this kind of audience for and community for Native Son that I wasn't even aware of, right? So fast forward, I worked at all these media companies. My time at Essence probably had the most impact on creating Native Son because I was in this space where Black women were supporting, uplifting each other, empowering each other, being super successful. And I would sit in the rooms and cry because I was like, I want this for my community. I want this for my Black queer community. I want my brothers to experience the same love, support. And we didn't have spaces that weren't clubs, bars, hookup spots, chat rooms, apps. We didn't have places in the light to be able to come together and say, hey, we're three Black queer entrepreneurs. Let's talk about this. Let's learn from each other. Let's build. And so that was the dream. I think from a cultural impact perspective, I'm grateful that the vision came to me to start Native Son in 2016, which was the first time Trump was elected. So we've been through this before. And also we survived, right? We made it. We made it from 2016. We're still here. So we know that we are built for this. I think the other impact is we did a collapsal collection of t-shirts with Bloomingdale's. They sold out in like a week. And Kevin Harder, who's the head of marketing at Bloomingdale's, was like, called me and was like, why do you think they sold out? I said, because you just took the brand of Native Son from New York and made it national. And you put it into people's department stores and platforms where they can buy it. They can have equity now in Native Son, right? A portion of the proceeds were donated to Native Son. And that leads to Native Son becoming part of the vernacular, right? And so when I first started hearing Black, gay, and queer men and gender nonconforming folks say, I'm a Native Son, right? I knew that we had cultural impact. So it's continuing to grow. I'm glad that it was founded when it was founded so that now we have a foundation to do this work now. I think you look at the headlines, you look at the Pulitzer Prize, you look at the Oscars, Black, gay, and queer men dominate. And for so long, we've been hidden in the shadows. So the impact is here in real life. And I'm just grateful to be the steward of it.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And you're right. The impact is real on a personal level. And Emil, I don't know if I've even told you this, but when I spent about 10 years living abroad between
Yeah.
Shanghai and Hong Kong. And when I
Mhm.
came back in 2017, again, Trump was just coming into office. It was a really weird moment because I was gone all the Obama years and came back to something quite different. And
Mhm.
I remember getting to New York and wanting to find community. And
Mhm.
I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to start. And somehow
Mhm.
on social, I came across Native Son. And I was like,
Mhm.
that's it. And had, way before we had even met, had been
Mhm.
following the entire journey. And for the first time, had seen so many queer Black men that I had aspired to be one day. And I knew I was like, I haven't met them all yet, but eventually I will. And here we are today. So it really does have an impact on people for sure. And you talked a little bit, Emil, about your role specifically as an editor, but you also
Mm.
wear a few other hats, whether that's being a creative consultant, an educator, obviously the founder of
Mhm.
Native Son. You're quite busy, and I want to
Yeah.
know for the people who are listening and also wear many hats. How do all of those roles impact one another and shape
Mm.
your approach to leadership and storytelling? Because you're a good storyteller.
Oof. How much time do we have? Okay. Because it's a whole bunch of jobs. I'm going to start out with a racial stereotype that is true. My father is from St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, so I am West Indian. My mother is from Des Moines, Iowa, in the Midwest, which is very like work ethic. You think of farmers, you think of all this thing. So I grew up in a family that literally was always working, building, making community. My father had his own law practice. My mother was in all these different clubs. We were just always busy, and so um, it's not easy, but I think when Jonathan said, like, I think Jonathan or you said you're always working. Like I'm literally always working. Um, and so the balance part is hard. What I've learned to do, and this took some time with Native Son, like I struggled with the focus of what Native Son was. I knew it was community building, but people wanted it to be like, well, who are you helping? And then people were like, I don't understand why the Instagram, you all look great. Like, what's the problem? And I was like, that's the problem. Um, but what I learned finally when the light bulb went off, believe it or not, was not, I think, maybe 3, 4 years in, where I was like, it should be a media platform. That is my expertise. That is my passion. That is my legacy. Let's shift Native Son into a media platform that is focusing on archiving, of being a platform where we tell our stories that can do mirror work, that will be an archive for generations to come. We're named after James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son. Native Son will be that icon for the next generations in the future. So there was that part. I tried to make everything align. So me teaching journalism at FIT and PR and magazine feature writing aligns into the other media work that I do, that aligns with me writing cover stories for for New York Times, for The Cut, for Architectural Digest, all that work. Um, and then everything that I do focuses around Black queer culture, like everything. So that helps align everything, even to the work I do at my church, which is centered around LGBTQ and social justice. Everything kind of is aligned. So that way it doesn't feel too crazy. Um, but it is difficult to wear a lot of hats. And one of the things I think that is most important is how do you wear all the hats and take care of yourself and do the core work, because you can't be leading and serving a community of Black, gay, and queer men and then not take care of yourself, because that's the message we want. So it's a balancing act, but it's fun, it's scary. I depleted my 401k too, and don't regret it. I needed it at the time, and I was there to support the business. And now I'm at a place where it's this inflection point. Next year, Native Son will be 10 years old. And what does that look like from an infrastructure perspective, from a succession plan perspective, from a growth perspective, right? How do we expand?
Well, that's beautiful. Very excited about that expansion. Because yes, what you've been able to do in such a short period of time is
Mm,
remarkable, and the reach is honestly probably even more than what we know. So
mm,
can't wait to see that growth. And one thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of switch
mm,
gears to the art world. So Jonathan, I want to kind of ask you some questions about what is it like building a business in this industry. But before we do that, can you, in like probably 5 sentences, break down how does the art world work and how do we make money? I know that's something that a lot of people don't know. So anytime I have these conversations with colleagues, I'm like, let's just start from the very basics and then we can get into how you are expanding that industry.
Well, Philip, when are we making money yet? I'm not quite sure I have that answer for us. But we are rich in social capital and hopefully like what we're doing as far as shifting the culture, right? The art world makes money, at least for the gallery perspective. You know, me as a gallerist, I would consign works from an artist. So what that means for people who may not be familiar with is that I might borrow works from an artist. So if a show is up for 2 months, I would consign those works from an artist for those 2 months or a little bit more than 2 months, giving shipping to and from. And what that usually happens is in the gallery space is that 50% of the work that is sold, or excuse me, 50% of the money that's made goes to the artist, 50% goes to the gallery. So the gallerist, it's a gamble for all of us, right? Involved. It can be quite costly, one to have overhead cost as a gallery with the rent being very expensive, no matter really where you are, but definitely in San Francisco and New York City and Los Angeles, where we have the highest rents for spaces, commercial spaces. Then also, having the artworks photographed, having maybe a writer or someone who may do your public relations, that also comes into your overhead expense. So while it might seem, people think about it like if you're selling a painting for $10,000, 5,000 would go to the artist, 5,000 would go to the gallery. It's amazing how quickly that $5,000 that the gallery would have made, and even for the artist, goes so quickly, right? Because the artist has to pay for the materials, they have to pay for their studio space, they have to pay for their rent of where they're living. So, sometimes shows look and seem to be quite successful when they're up, but you have to think about the fact that it's taken an artist, maybe some artists take an entire year to build out an entire solo exhibition. And if they have 10 pieces in that show, and let's say hopefully all of them do sell, that still may only cover their year's worth of expenses when you look back at it, because they've had to live, they've had to probably borrow money to survive, they've had to pay for their supplies, maybe for travel, for places of inspiration. So it's not as big as a moneymaker as I think people think gallery life in the art world is, until you become a blue chip artist, right? And you're talking like you're making 6 figures, and the galleries who are representing artists are making 6 figures. Then that comes along with big endorsement deals too, whether they're working with fashion houses, hotels, car companies. So I think the finances behind it often are a little bit obscure. I also think that's why I've enjoyed being a gallerist so much, is because I wanted to take that away and I wanted to be much more transparent and what's happening behind the scenes. So even when I look at the gallery's Instagram or like building out a show, I usually take you more behind so you can see what it really looks like to make something come to life, right? And it's not something that it's glamorous as it might look in the opening reception night. Sometimes, you're putting together a show leading up to it 30 minutes before, as I'm sure you know, Philip, with last minute duties. But that's really what it's like on the back end side when it comes to looking at it financially. Philip, what was your other question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that is wonderful, and I wish I had it recorded to play anytime I'm going to a new event or a new place, because I think the economics behind the scene are really, really important for not just the art world people to understand, but artists and collectors and people who are interested in getting involved, because it is a nuanced and opaque industry. So thank you for breaking that down. And I think, as you said, the traditional way of making money in the art world is through selling art, but we're seeing a major shift in a multi-channel art experience, whether it's on the media side or the e-commerce side, or collaborating with brands and really expanding the idea of what art is, which I find really, really exciting. And I know, in addition to fairs and exhibitions, you are super creative and bringing a lot of things to the table. So I'd love for you to kind of share how you're innovating with your programming to expand what's possible for both artists and collectors.
Yeah, of course. And you mentioning brand opportunities, these are also great ways for people to just engage with art. Because like I mentioned before, the art world at a time, and sometimes still is really meant for maybe a particular type of person. But I think when you have the opportunities like brand engagement, or like I have partnerships with hotels like in Miami or even here in San Francisco, or I did something recently in Chicago. These are opportunities where people who may not be used to seeing art, who may not have thought art is for them, who may not think art is for them to collect, these are ways for us to engage them in new ways, right? And that to me is what's really exciting. And when I feel like you can see something that either looks like you or speaks to you or reminds you of someone that you know or challenges your mindset, I think that's what art is meant to do for all of us, right? And it's really meant to be about dialogue. And I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, but even thinking about, like, unfortunately, we're in a very tough political climate right now. Emil, you touched on it before. We have been here before and we did survive it. But I'm really curious and I'm excited to see the art that comes out of what's happening in the world
Mhm.
today, right? Because 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that will be a historical reference for all of us. Maybe not times we all enjoyed living, but great times, and that we can see what creativity has birthed, right? Because some of
Mhm.
the best artists that we know that are living and dead today, um, they've come from those times. Like when we think about the civil rights movement and
Mhm.
the gay rights movement, we still reference all those artists, and they're artists that are highly sought after, and they're ones where you can have conversations around whether or not you may agree or disagree with the person you're sitting in front of, but it sparks conversation. And to
Mhm.
me, art can change so much and can change your mindset, and it can change, how people view things. I think about queer artists in particular. You were talking about media before, Emil, and I think about television and how queer people were really brought into people's living rooms through
Mhm.
television. I think, of course,
Mhm.
magazine and media, but I also think art is going to be a way to shift that landscape.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
whether or not, right? I mean, would you say so too?
Oh yeah, I agree with I'm just nodding in agreement because I'm everything you're saying is aligning with what I think should be my contribution to this, which is that, I think about for myself the two inflection points, right? One would be the crack epidemic, right? Because hip hop was born out of that era, right? Post civil rights, post disco, crack era. How do we kind of possess ourselves, right? How do we speak out about injustices, homophobia, misogyny, all these things, right? And then the other is the AIDS crisis, right? Where a whole generation was wiped out. So when I think about the work with Native Son, people in the beginning were like, you all are so focused on your Instagram and these pictures of these beautiful black men. And the reason I referenced that earlier is that's the point. I was speaking to someone from the Black AIDS Institute, and she said, I love that you're using art as activism. And that is the point, right? This everything you just said about wanting to see yourself, how you're reflected. So many of my friends now are married, having kids, all this stuff. And they're like, you kept pushing Black, gay, and queer love on Native Son, where you normalized it for many of us and made it something that was aspirational. Right. And so I think seeing all and even just let's fine tune it for this conversation to artist, right? You think about Derek Adams, right? And the moment he's having right now. And to see someone that looks like us, someone that is creating work that is a reaction to what is happening in society. The fact that he did all this stuff about rest and play and all of that to remind us that we struggle all the time in our social justice and civil rights work, but we also deserve to rest. We deserve Black joy. So I think you're right. I mean, it's going to be amazing to see the artwork, the visual, the representation, the storytelling that will come from this very dark, nadir time, and as someone so eloquently put in the chat, the Harlem Renaissance 2025.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to say, Philip, with Emil's reference to Derek Adams, when you asked me before about how I got here, it was actually a South African photographer, Zanele Maholi,
Mm,
who most people, if you don't know them, their name is spelled Zanele, last name Muholi. They are a South African queer photographer who started documenting a series called Faces and Phases. And they wanted to photograph individuals who were going missing, actually, a lot in South Africa because they were simply queer. And over time, it ended up becoming this photo journal that showed us the beauty that exists in South Africa of queer Black people when no one else was caring about these individuals, whether they were being correctively raped, whether they would go missing. And Zanele Maholi was the one to first document this grouping of individuals. Now you can see Maholi in every single museum show, right? You know, they just had a show that opened up in Los Angeles. They have a show that's getting ready to close soon in New York. They were a part of the Venice Biennale in 2019, and they have directly been an influence on who I am as a gallerist because I went to a show in Canada and I saw one image of them. And that was the first time in my life, I was 33 years old, that I ever felt like I saw someone that looked like me and was queer. I've lived all over the world and I've never seen a Black queer person on a wall like I saw them. And that to me is exactly how art can have a direct impact on who you are as an individual and how it can shift and change your future and your landscape, which is what I imagine will happen in the same era that we're living in right now with the current administration and what's happening to individuals who are anything that goes against Donald Trump, right? And in particular, for this call, we're talking about queer people. And I'm very curious to see and excited to see what comes out of this for art and the challenges that we will face, but then also the great conversations that we will have and the impact that art will have on all of us in the future.
Oh,
Well, and it's also super interesting, right? Like that you also have these big museum shows right now in New York that are led by Black people, right? Black artists, right? And those the larger than life pictures of paintings of Amy Sherrill at the Whitney, and that couple, right? That's kissing is ginormous. It's like made me so happy to see Black queer love gigantic at the Whitney in living, vivid color, right? And all these people, not just LGBTQ folks, taking pictures in front of it because it means so much, right? But I think it's that. I think it's, Micheline Thomas's work, Rashid Johnson at the Guggenheim. I mean, there's so much great work. And even, listen, Superfine at the Met. Like there's a moment happening in real time that is a reaction to what has led to this. So imagine what is going to come out of this actual period of time.
it's extremely, extremely exciting. And one thing at Good Black Art is when I started it, a lot of the stories that I knew were near and dear to me and my community. I just didn't see them. And I remember the first thing that I wrote down when I was making a business plan was art is a communication tool to amplify our stories at scale. And it has stuck with me in every single decision that we've made for Good Black Art in the 3.5 years. And really just parallels and complements everything that you all have said. And I know I want to leave some room for questions, but I do want to speak really quickly about the future because both of you all mentioned it. I think from a business perspective, I'd love to just know what's the one thing that you still find missing in mainstream media or the business landscape that connects to our community, and that you want to see, continue to push that change forward. Again, I think that there is so much progress. I think our three businesses alone is an example of how we just have to do the work. But again, more work to be done. So I'd love to know, like, from an optimistic perspective, what work more can we do? And I'd love to hear from y'all.
Jonathan.
Well, I was gonna ask for more clarity. So, Philip, what more can we do just generally overall from our entrepreneurial journeys, or is there something that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be great just to learn more about yeah, what more can we be doing to bring in a new group of folks to continue the infrastructure and building of businesses in our community.
Yeah, I mean, I think one, we're doing it now. The three of us of course, we all know each other now, but I think working together collaboratively is something that is quite unique and special and something that should happen more often within the communities because you don't know who you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Right. And when you're introduced to someone who's doing something different, like how Emil and I met through a college friend of mine, he and I have been able to work on other projects together since then,
Mhm.
and that in such a short amount of time, and are very happy to support one another when you raise your hand and you say you need some help or you want to see something like this or you want something else to happen. So I think working together in collaborative and creative ways and having open discussions about what we can do
Mhm.
to help one another is something that's very important. I think that we sometimes operate in a world of you should be able to do everything by yourself and you don't need to call on people. And I don't think that that is conducive for a great environment to grow for any of us, right? When the
Mhm.
reality is like Emil has a great media background. Philip, you have truly been an entrepreneur and seeing and starting good Black art, and you've created great, fabulous partnerships. I mean, I just saw you last week running around New York at all the art fairs, and then you juried, or you were on the selection committee for 154, and you and I were connected in different ways earlier on. But I think us continuing to work together and support each other is something that we can all
Mhm.
need to do better and bigger. I also think that when someone asks, and someone's coming up and they're asking questions, like every time someone asks me, like, hey, can I interview you? Can I talk to you? How did you do this? Time is short for all of us, but I really try to turn around and give it back because I
Yeah.
know that like, if it wasn't someone like Zanelli Maholi who answered my DM asking
Mhm.
about their work, and I got to interview them for a blog that I had started, I wouldn't be where I am today,
Mhm.
right? So giving back and making sure you make room for the person who wants to do what you're doing or want to be in the space that you're in to learn from you is something that I think we can all continue to do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think part of my focus right now is kind of like, how are we building the next generation? How are we giving young people opportunities, people that haven't, or people that come from academia that or an art that then want to go work in media and business? How are we giving them that exposure, right? So I think mentorship is really important. But how do you scale mentorship is something I've been really thinking about a lot. It's like if we have 80,000 plus mostly native sons on our Instagram account, how many of them are professional? How many of them are artists who have skills? How many are writers? What trades do they work in? What skills do they have? And how can they pass that on to if each person took one protege, right, and trained them. So what does that look like from a community building as a native son kind of ethos? What does that look like? So that's one thing I'm thinking about. I'm also thinking about this idea of working with young people who to find out what their strengths are, what their interests are, and how do you build that and kind of groom that without kind of any wanting anything back, just helping to be faster, stronger, and supporting each other. And then the third big thing for me is, how do I engage the community to power Native Son? I can be looking for VCs, I can looking for different money, and I definitely need it for our lovely host at Start Out on the call. Um, but how do I also engage my own community to pour back into this platform, this movement, community, and platform to power it so that it is Black and queer owned, that it is Black and queer powered, right? So that, yes, the Instagram is lovely and myself and the consultants work really hard on it, right? And the same thing with the Queerty partnership and our content platform. But how do I get the community to like, you know what? You're right. We got to protect Native Son at all costs, and we have to help fund Native Son so Emil can build infrastructure to expand and touch more and go global and do all the things.
Oh, that is all really insightful. I think it's great that we can be doing things together. Emil, I think your add-ons there, specifically about mentorship, is so important. And something I'm gonna take away from that is also the at scale, because the one-on-one is super important and that can extend. But there are so many other ways that we can be innovative to continue the work that we're doing, because I know that there's more of us out there. But I will take a quick pause. I've got more questions. So if we don't have any questions, Danny, I can get back into it, but I'm happy to pass things over to you to get some more questions for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Philip. And thank you all so much. This has just been so much fun to just sit and listen to you all chat this all day. I do want to open up space. BB, I see that you have your hand raised. Apparently, Zoom allows me to allow you to talk, so I'm going to try that. You can ask your question. And then you can just unmute and ask your question, BB.
That was an accident. I did not know I pressed that, but now we know that it works.
Perfect. Awesome. We do have a question from Angela. Is there room for exhibits that don't have works to sell, but aim to empower and impact the community? Jonathan, do you want to answer that?
I think you said Angela asked that question. Thanks, Angela, for that question. I actually was in a meeting yesterday talking about this. There definitely is room.
Uh-oh.
No, just a little technical issue.
For it. The great, because as a commercial gallerist, uh-oh, can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
You went
Okay,
out. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Angela, I was just in a meeting yesterday talking about having exhibition spaces or exhibitions that aren't necessarily about selling artworks. And the problem is that, you know, like I mentioned before about overhead, so it's hard for me to be able to give up the space to have an exhibition like that. But I've been thinking about ways that maybe I can collaborate and work with brands that might be willing to sponsor it. So like maybe I can just, you know, have the gallery closed for maybe 6 weeks and not be stressed about making overhead and having someone be able to want to go ahead and put forth sponsorship dollars to have exhibitions like that. Because as much as I do love museums, you know, they can't be as nimble as a smaller business can, right? Because there's just so much tied into what goes into a museum. Whereas as a gallery owner, I could flip my space immediately if I wanted to. So yes, I do think there is an opportunity there for that. I'm working on something that's a bigger project about 2 years from now, but I would like to do something on a smaller scale, but I do think that it can exist. And Philip, I think, you know, we might have touched on that before a little bit too, Philip and Emil, when we were coming up with ideas to do something around Pride this year, but maybe it's to next year, but maybe you guys have some input too you might want to share.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that short answer is yes. I am actually in Hudson, New York right now. Good Black Art is doing a summer residency with our partner Creative Legion, and part of that residency is 2 exhibitions. The first one is going to go up on Friday, so as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to head back over to the gallery space. But we as a team, we're also having conversations about how do we make sure that, you know, we make money on this, but also communicate what needs to be communicated. So there's actually 2 works in this exhibition that we're going to rotate out that are not for sale. But in terms of the narrative, the artist and you know what they wanted to communicate in the story, it was perfect. So I think that there are some ways that, you know, we can balance the commercial side, but also make sure that that message and that story is always prioritized. So we're always looking for ways to balance it. To your point, Jonathan, working with brands and other organizations when the budget and funding is there is also a great way to do it. And even Emil, we've worked on projects before where maybe we didn't actually have artwork, but we were talking about art and we were making sure that it was part of the conversation and accessible. And I believe like collecting art specifically and living with art doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the physical piece, right? There's so many ways to engage with it. And that's one thing that we're really interested at Good Black Art is like, how can we keep pushing the boundaries of what is collectible, what is how it's accessed, who it's for. So I completely agree. I gave you the long answer too, but yes.
Awesome.
Fantastic. While we wait for the next question to come in, I do want to share, you should see on your screen now a slide that has a website and at least Instagram for each of our panelists. Please make sure to follow them, show them some love, see all of the incredible work that they're doing, and continue to support it. I do have a follow-up question, 2 questions. How can we help our friends, family that don't understand the art world feel comfortable being in this space? A follow-up, how can we help them understand that we are the ones now that have to preserve things for generations that we'll see in the future? Emil, I know you talked a little bit about your legacy. Do you want to take the first stab at that?
Sure. I think part of it is um, Ex I like to get really simple with folks and be like, if you grew up in the Black church, you know what the Martin Luther King fan is, right? And so, like, the Martin Luther King fan is a piece of ephemera, right? It was something that you used to, Black women used to fan themselves in church. But that was also like these, like, photographs and paintings of Martin Luther King. That's artwork, right? So I think it's an easier conversation to have even with elder people because Instagram really is a form of artwork and archiving, right? Those images, how people present themselves, how they tell their story, how they own their own narrative. So I think that's one way to help explain to people the importance. I think there's a lot of young people now that are like archiving and working for actually big brands creating archives. Everything we touch, we do, we make, we write. All my Moleskin notebooks are archived, right? And so I think it's the importance of holding those things so that you can use it as even just like losing a grandparent. You want to hold on to that memory of that person, that life of that person, that impact of that person, which could simply be a beautiful Mother's Day card, right? So I think looking at art in that way helps people understand humanity better, right? And love and compassion. And I know there was a second part, but I don't remember the second part.
You got them both in there. I think any other
Okay.
comments on how to help folks who are outside of the art world feel?
Yeah, I think Emil touched on it. Art is everything. And to take it one step further, I think it really is about finding what people are interested in, finding out what their passion points are. Something that I've learned even with my family, young and old, is asking, who are you? What do you like? And then matching those narratives to artists who I know are creating stories within that genre. It could be racing, it could be food, it could be religion. Artists are storytellers and have these experiences and across so many different mediums. So I really think it's about connecting to those passion points and once you do that, I think it becomes much easier to say, like, do you want to live with it? But your price range. So before we even get to all that, though, it has to start within, and we have to know who the person is, and really think about how to make it attainable and accessible.
Fantastic. Well, we're coming up to the final moments of our time, but on behalf of Start Out and myself, because I mentioned that I was fangirling over all of you, thank you so much for your time. We're incredibly grateful for the expertise that you shared with our community, for bringing this conversation to us. Maybe in the last minute, what do you have coming up? I know you've all mentioned, Jonathan, your show, Emil, things coming up as well. Maybe give us one last thing that we should be keeping an eye out for.
Native Son Awards are June 11th. That is my big focus right now. Like I said, we're going to be streaming on our Native Son Now Facebook and YouTube channels. So if you can't be there, tickets are $300. But if you can't be there, I would really appreciate people tuning in, sharing with your communities and donating. If it's $1, $2, $5, we take everything. If it's more than that, that would be fantastic. And all of that you can find on our Native Son Now Instagram page. So yeah, that's my big plug.
I got my ticket. I'm ready.
Okay.
And I have the show opening up called To Be Seen on June 6th is the opening reception. So if you happen to be in the Bay Area that weekend, you're more than welcome to come by. The reception will be from 6 to 8 p.m. With all Black queer artists. And I'm sorry, Emil, that I will be missing the Native Son Awards, but I will watch from the Berkshires from the art fair Okay.
Oh, exactly. And you will be able to read about Jonathan and his art show on the Native Son on Queerty channel. So we're really excited to be doing that and cover all these artists. See how this works?
Thank you.
Oh, and John and Philip will be featured in our Native Son Pride campaign. That's right.
That's
By Eric Hart Jr. A lot of things going on.
Very, very excited. And as I mentioned, Good Black Art is doing a summer residency here in Hudson, New York at Creative Legion. We'll be starting off with our first exhibition called Touching Grass. You all the first to hear about it. We're announcing that tomorrow. And then we'll be here for Upstate Art Weekend in July for our second exhibition. Really excited to share more about that, as well as there's some construction happening, as well as some additional programming in parallel to the fair. So,
Fantastic, y'all.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for your time today. I think my key takeaway is how important community is and how you all are uplifting each other and uplifting the rest of the community. So thank you for that. Recording of this session will be shared with all of our attendees. Again, thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Start Out.